Well, thanks everyone for coming. I'm Arte Merritt, the BD go-to-market specialist for Bedrock here in the West Coast, working with my teammate John, who was here a second ago. We'll reintroduce him when he comes back. We have a great panel here tonight to talk about some of the trends and predictions in Gen AI. So I want to welcome them all up here. And I have a set of questions to run through, but then we'll open up to the audience if you have questions at all. But we definitely appreciate everyone coming for this event. Hello? Yeah. So once again, thanks everyone for coming. Just wanted to have the panel maybe do quick intros of yourselves, who you are, what you do, and then we can get into all of this stuff. So, Robert.
Sure. Hey everybody, Barath, Chari. I'm a partner at Sonsini. I'm in the technology transactions team, so I work with AI companies and complex commercial transactions.
Here we go. Hey all, I'm Sam Lisowski. So I'm a senior sales leader at AWS on our Gen AI startups team. So I have the opportunity to work with different Gen AI startups. I guess every startup likely has an AI component now these days. I've been at AWS for going on 6 years and looking forward to the discussion today.
Hi everyone, thanks Artie for inviting me. I'm Anamitra. I am a co-founder of a venture fund called Afore Capital. Afore comes before everything else. It's by definition, we invest only in pre-seed stage companies. We started in 2016 with a $47 million fund. Today we're investing in our fourth fund, a $188 million fund. We are about 10 minutes down the road. My background is engineering, product management, and then venture. And my fondest memories are actually getting drunk with Artie a long time ago when he used to live here. I should have probably not say anymore.
Thanks. So actually, this first question I'm going to ask of all of you, and then we'll go into separate ones. There's been so much going on this year with Gen AI, and each of you are sitting in really unique spots. For seeing so much in terms of like the deal flow. Even with Anamitra, so many startups pitching you, and then Sam working with some of the top startups in this space doing Gen AI. So I'm somewhat curious, what have you seen as some of the biggest trends? Maybe like one or two trends you've seen with Gen AI or agentic AI. This year?
Sure, I can get started. I think one of the biggest things, I guess two things we've noticed. One is the volume of startups has just increased radically. At least this year, I think it started last year. We've seen a lot of younger folk move back to San Francisco. That used to happen back in 2010s or so when the pendulum finally swung from Menlo Park to San Francisco with Zynga and Twitter and Airbnb and Dropbox and Uber, and then it kind of went flat for a bit, and then COVID hit and people left and people came back again. And a lot of folks, first time out of school, are no place to go. They're thinking of San Francisco, mostly because of AI, and that's been a massive influx. Many of them want to start companies. The second thing I think we've seen this year, the conversation has moved on from benchmarks or improvements in foundation models, frontier models, to actual applications, the actual deployments in the enterprise. It's gone from people talking about prompts and prompt engineering to agents, and agents doing actual work, and companies investing more and more in AI. I think that's been a big shift. It's not just about the models anymore, it's about the application of those models across verticals.
Yeah, so I think back in 2023, right, following the break of ChatGPT, we saw this revolution of models coming out, large language models, foundation models, And if anyone knows Amazon and AWS, we have a culture of writing. So at the end of 2023, I was writing a doc just saying, hey, I think agentic is going to be the really next big shift we see where folks are going to use existing models to build out in the agentic space, whether that's coding or SRE, et cetera. And I think we'll continue to see that startups, enterprises, et cetera, are going to adopt, agentic technology. And I think, to your point, I was reading ahead of time, I think we're seeing now that in the enterprise space, in 2025, enterprise AI adoption has moved from POC to production up to 70%, which is really interesting. And then the final point that I think we've seen this past year and will continue into 2026 is around the 3D space, the applied and material science space, and the manufacturing space, and it will converge with robotics as well as the media and entertainment space. So I didn't expect to see this, but I think there's going to be a whole new round of models, model builders, foundation model builders that come out in that space. And I think it's going to be really interesting in how it impacts those industries in media and entertainment, mining, oil and gas, et cetera. So those are some of the few trends that I've been observing.
So you stole some of my thunder there. But so in the past year, I think that's been fascinating to me is just coming to terms with the sheer scale of investment that's coming into the space, and tons of which is just on infrastructure. That's not just AWS, but also power and data center space, all kinds of stuff. So just the amount of capital that's being poured into this space has been really mind-boggling, and just understanding how it all fits together and how it all works is a very interesting thing. I think a second thing that from a legal perspective that I've seen is kind of enterprises now are adopting this at scale and see kind of the mismatch between enterprise expectation and what these new companies can actually provide and how they can work together has been interesting. It's been a maturing space, I think, over the last year.
Yeah, these are all great trends. Well, one thing that's, Anamitra, you're talking about the startups, younger folks coming out here. We see it with, I was mentioning earlier, we do a lot with YC, and you see the folks all move out here, and they're often fairly young. How are you seeing the makeup of the startups now? Are you seeing, before you have maybe 2 or 3 co-founders, you try to build out the team larger and larger. Do you need as big a teams now? Are you investing in smaller teams, or do you even see solo entrepreneurs getting funding?
I think vibe coding is pretty easy for non-technical founders to get started. Started with if you're a go-to-market or a business person and you want to build a finance app or something like that, you can probably get started with just vibe coding just to demo something. But ultimately, I think you need someone who knows a little bit more than surface level code to actually build something that you can put in production, that if it breaks, they know how to fix it. So I from that perspective, I don't see the team makeup hasn't really changed, which is actually 1 or 2 founders, maybe 3, a couple of them technical, who can actually build, they have an opinion. Usually the teams we invest in, sometimes when they don't work out, it's usually not because of a technology or R&D gap, it's because nobody wanted to buy whatever they're selling. So that part hasn't really changed. I think one part that has changed is they don't need as much capital. Thanks to folks like AWS and credits from everybody else, you can get started with much less. I think you can get a good demo out. You can probably, but at some point you run out of the tokens and you need money, and then you need to raise. And sometimes you need to raise because you need to hire another person. You can probably delay a lot of that. You don't need to raise $1 million, but you might need to raise 100,000 or 200,000 just to demonstrate there's something here. So I think the cost of starting has been going down ever since the cloud came out. You don't have to buy you don't have to build your own database. You don't have to store. There's no storage cost as such. The costs have come down. The cost of starting has always come down. It's coming down even more now because you don't need as many engineers. Many of our portfolio companies, when they're getting started, when we just fund them, they're usually not hiring a lot of people right out of the bat. They are probably replacing junior engineers with a cursor for some time because that's a 10x improvement. But at some point, they do have to raise. because they have to raise because of a couple of reasons. One is they need more people, so you probably need to raise about 10 million or so eventually at the Series A. But we have seen this trend where companies who Gamma is an example of one of our portfolio companies. They build slides. If you were to build PowerPoint today, you build Gamma because you can chat with the interface and build slides, and charts will appear, research happens on its own, and insights get delivered on its own, and you can change the data set, etc. And it's a beautiful presentation at the end of it. I think it's a very small team, 29, 30 people or so. They're doing significant amounts of revenue, and they were funding their growth with profit. They didn't really need to raise venture after their initial round from Excel, the $10 million round, and they only raised much later on. Recently, actually, it's a large round that Andreessen Horowitz led, pricing the company at about $2 billion because they were raising on their own terms, and it also helps recruit the next set of talents because many people who would join a company and they're leaving maybe another amazing workplace. They want to know the long term. They want to know where this is going, and if there are
It's worth $2 billion.
that's right. They want it to be even bigger.
So it's interesting you talk about the vibe coding to get started. I listened to one of your presentations, pretty cool, about the IP side of things. Like, how does that factor in? Because then would the startup own this IP and folks are invested in something that was generated by code?
Yeah, so I think it's a very overrated issue, right? So I think that if you aren't leveraging AI tools to build code, you're making a mistake, right? I mean, you're going to be left behind. It's an accelerator. So with that understanding, there is a con to it, which is that the output of AI is not copyrightable under the law. But what does that mean? I mean, software companies aren't suing each other for copyright infringement, right? I think what's important is you get outputs and you keep it secret. You're not sharing your source code with people, and you still have IP there that you can value. So I think the cat's out of the bag on that one. Someday the law might change and they might say that some outputs are copyrightable, but as of now, I think if people say, oh, well, that's not copyrightable, it's a red herring, and I think it's thinking get past.
So Sam, I have two things. When you mentioned you were writing the doc on agentic AI, did you write it or do you use Claude or anything now?
Okay, so probably not the right audience to say this because I went to school for writing. So I wrote it myself. I'm still getting used actually to on a day-to-day basis, and I like to be transparent about this. Using the Gen AI tooling to write. I am still very much so my own human in the loop when I do use it and review it very carefully. Especially depending on where it's being sent. So now I've definitely used it, but that was at the end of 2023, I just wrote it.
Yeah, fair enough.
by hand.
You were mentioning like the 3D space and applied materials as one of the areas. I wonder if there's any other verticals that you've seen been taken off this past year.
Yeah, so I think that, last year, for sure, we saw a lot of movement in the healthcare, life sciences, and biotech space from a startup perspective. Second, we see from an enterprise adoption space that healthcare is one of the main areas that is adopting it for a case document, taking notes, etc. I think what that led to is this next revolution that's going to impact spaces like oil and gas, mining, when we talk about data and power, the ability to, this next round of companies in this space will be able to say and predict material to use that's sustainable in, say, in a data center environment. Or if you think about a plant, right, and a really dangerous task, the convergence of using robots that are trained and using a model on the back end and inference to go inspect a valve that will, it protects people and safety at the end of the day. So I think if you really think about, companies like Blue Origin, SpaceX, the data centers, the power problem, et cetera, that's going to be the next big area where we see AI startups come into play, and then it's how do these enterprise companies adopt it in those more so traditional spaces.
Fair enough. One thing, I was just chatting with someone before this event started, and they were talking about all the LLMs, and so we kind of democratized everything here. People have access to the same models. I'm curious if any of you, how you feel about the possibility of creating your own model now, because in some ways you could argue some of these are becoming almost commoditized. They have thoughts on this, like, building your own versus just using the Anthropic, Gemini's, OpenAI's.
That's a hard thing to do, right? I mean, it's such a capital intensive task that I think that where we do see it is like material science, for example, if you're trying to build new models in that space, you might raise a ton of money, like periodic labs did, because you're going to build your own new model for that vertical. I think what you will see for people that train models is more small language models. If you're talking about text, where you make a small model that's specific to a domain that can be deployed on edge or inside a corporate environment, so that there are fewer concerns around data security and things like that.
We haven't really, we're a pre-seed fund, so we don't get to invest in infrastructure or like language learning models. They raise billions out of the gate. We put in millions, so it's kind of small, but we do invest in application level companies. And one of the things we're seeing is like, not that we're investors, but we have a company that got acquired by Cursor. I wish we could say we're investors in Cursor, but I guess technically we are. But I've heard that Cursor is in a race to build, to take advantage of its data, its users, to build some kind of a model, because they don't want to be too over reliant on Anthropic. And if there are folks from Anthropic or Cursor, they will probably know more about that here. But you couldn't do that in the past because you had to build a model from scratch. But now you can. Now you have open source models, so you can at least get going. So the question sometimes becomes in this particular case where language models are realizing that the money might be in the applications, as we've seen with coding to start, but finance is probably coming soon. Customer support is happening. You are talking about sort of many of the manufacturing, supply chain, healthcare, all those industries. So the money might be in the applications, and there are some fast-growing application companies. The race is for, and we're already seeing these language models build applications themselves and launch. For example, Gamma has competition from OpenAI, they have competition from Anthropic, but Gamma is still winning. Will one day Gamma reverse integrate with models on their own, building on top of DeepSeek or something else? And more open source models are coming out. They have access to user context and user preferences, a whole host of user data. They have workflow integrations. So it's kind of like a race. The race is, does the applications remain sticky and they reverse integrate and build better models or competing models, or do the models eventually build better applications and unseat the application in the first place? It's a fascinating race. It's good to have bets on both sides, just to see who wins.
There's another one that's kind of like the super agents. Have you, like the GenSpark Manus? I don't know if you've taken a look at those, but in some ways they're sort of, I guess a super version of ChatGPT or Claude, having similar functionality. Like they'll have a functionality for building PowerPoint or doing some code, but it's not their core.
Yeah, no, so I think just building on that and building on what you said, so I think a number of startups today, I know Cursor very well, and what we've seen is that they want to use the best model that's available. And sometimes that's closed source, sometimes that's open source. And a lot of the companies will start building with, on an Anthropic, et cetera. And then, of course, then you start to see this convergence of an Anthropic and say a Cursor, say in the earlier days. And so they'll build on those state-of-the-art models that are out there, an open source model. And then what I've tended to see is that then they'll start to build, their own models in-house to make sure that they're not reliant on, say, the existing, OpenAI, Anthropic, et cetera, models that are available and really well known in the space. And then you talk about these super agents, and one of the companies I work with and that I look at is Resolve AI, for example, and what they're doing, right? So they're in the SRE agentic space. And a lot of companies like that are going to, again, use existing models for high level tasks, and then they'll start to build their own models in-house, and kind of dog food them to test them for lower priority type of agentic tasks and flows. So I think that, and then that will all come together to truly be that multimodal where they can handle image, text, video, etc., whatever they're working on.
Yeah, the agentic AI space is one of the ones I'm most excited about now. For folks that know, we launched something called Agent Core, first in July, and then it went GA back in October. And Anamitra touched on this a little bit about the agents actually doing real work. I'm curious where y'all might see the agentic AI going. Are there particular use cases like Resolve with the SRE or any agentic specific use cases that resonate or you're seeing or investing in? Yeah.
We see quite a bit, and we invest across many verticals. Like recruiting is one area where recruiters would cold call candidates or email. They would get them on the phone, and then they would qualify, screen them, and then and set them up for like the hiring manager to hire. And that's being done by voice, by a robot. From a company of ours called Converse, and they're not the only ones. There are other people that are doing it. And the phone calls are super low latency, very smart agents, can convince you to apply and gets information from you that goes into a PDF report that you wouldn't know if it's a human being did it or someone else did it. High conversion rates, and these agents don't sleep. They work 24/7. They don't ask for a break. There's no Saturday or Sunday, and they can go through the lead list in like no time. And they're scraping the web for candidates, and they're reaching out. And same thing is happening in sales with some other companies, or another set of companies in customer support. When there's a ticket that comes in, we have a company, e-commerce, in the e-commerce space. They get a lot of questions from customers about product returns and this and that. And they hired a team in the Philippines, a 100-person team. I think they used to spend about $100,000 or so a month for their entire team. The founder vibe coded an app for customer support, and one of the things he told me is that when you're vibe coding something to make sure it actually works, you really have to understand the workflow. You really have to understand the user workflow. He knew it because he started the company. He knew exactly what the rules were, what can be returned, what can't, and what the answers are. Vibe coded it, and he went and he said, like, we used to get 15,000 tickets a week. Now we get 15. 99.9% of tickets are kind of gone. It's done by the agent. Doesn't need a team anymore, and 15 tickets get taken care of by people. And it's just an agent that he built, but he used Cursor to build it. But that's if one person can do that, what kind of company do?
Yeah, fair enough. It makes it interesting too, like the interfaces as well. Like I was at a talk where someone was talking about web browsers changing because if it's agents getting the data or performing the task for you, maybe it's not the same interface anymore. It's kind of interesting. I'm curious, Barath, what are you seeing in like the legal space? Like how are folks adopting, say, Gen AI or agentic AI?
Yeah, so excuse me. So I think that there's a lot of companies that are aimed straight at the legal space. Harvey AI, I'm sure you've all heard about, but there's hundreds of others, right? And I think the legal market is pretty hard to sell into because the people that are actually paying for it read the contracts very carefully and they have certain expectations. There's a lot of confidentiality and privilege and other issues, and there's just the fact that it has to be 100% accurate. There's no room for failure. So I think, for example, in our firm, we test all kinds of tools. We have very high standards, and we're seeing what we can adopt, what we've gone by as kind of point solutions to fix pain points where there are mundane tasks that we previously had to do that we don't need a person to do every step up, so that's where we're starting. I'm sure the capability will only increase from there. I think agentic workflows in particular are probably not as well suited for our industry as other industries, but there are some areas where you may see it coming, in particular, some aspects of the discovery and litigation or document preparation where there's more standardized workflows collating huge amounts of information that an agent can be helpful at. Exactly, like prior art searches, things like that, exactly.
One of the things that we do on the legal side is when we get contracts back, I think the first thing we do is like ask ChatGPT. Are there any terms here we should be thinking about? Then we get that, so we can when we talk to our lawyer, we actually have some understanding of what we're saying versus just blindly forwarding something just to understand. So we don't rely on it, of course.
So I'll say an interesting thing that's come up for me in the last 6 months is I send out stuff and founders with whom I work will run what I send them through AI and come back with a whole bunch of comments. And then I have to spend another hour explaining how it's wrong. And then I tell them, you're paying me to be right. Why are you asking the AI why I'm wrong, right? And it ends up costing them more just for me to explain it. So AI has its purposes. It was not to replace a lawyer like me.
I had a friend who's a doctor. He'd say the same thing about WebMD. People would come in and say, I have all these, this is my problem. And crazy stuff. That healthcare space is pretty interesting, though. Like, often folks, talk about their technologies if they're saving lives, but they're just building websites and mobile apps. But the folks that are doing like healthcare life sciences truly are like drug discovery and all that. I'm curious. Maybe I'm not sure if Sam, but any of the HLS ones you're doing like drug discovery at all, or the other kinds of healthcare? Or?
Yeah, so I see it on both sides. So on the healthcare side, and I can never remember, sorry, I don't know why this keeps giving me.
Yeah, well, some of them are a little bit on the
cool. Tricky. Cool. So I won't say names because I never can remember who's referenceable for sure. But I think, right, on the healthcare side, and if you think about a grandparent or an older relative and, they're hard of hearing, they may be lonely, they're having to make a lot of phone calls to doctors, et cetera. We're seeing companies who have an agentic component and where you call in and you're always talking to the AI and it remembers the last conversation, right? So I know my grandma will get on the phone and she'll want to tell her life story to them of how they got to getting to this appointment. And then the next time that she calls back, the agent will ask hey, by the way, I know you mentioned that getting to the doctor is hard because you have a cat and you also had a vet appointment. How did that vet appointment go, right? And also they remember things, right? Because if you think about a nurse, they only have so much time in a day. And what you were saying, these agents, they're 24/7 and they don't have they're not going to yell at their boss, which I don't know who their boss could actually be, but right, they're able to take that time and spend that time with them and remember and follow up. And another one we heard is my Nana, I'm really close with her. She's hard of hearing, so she says on the first call, I'm hard of hearing. They know that agent will know to speak up, louder on the next call or very clearly articulate so that she can help. And to see those real life examples come to fruition is really incredible. And then of course on the life sciences side, I mean, there's no end of what's going on there where, we're finding, cures for, or doing research, or there's companies in that space, I guess, that come out of research and they're focusing, say, on diseases or problems that were previously underfunded. So that's really fascinating. I think that'll continue to evolve. I think we've all seen that in the space. I'm not as much of an expert on the LS side of things, so I won't go too deep there. But yeah, that's definitely still a trend. And again, healthcare is, I think in 2025 was the largest adopter of AI in-house.
Oh, wow. Speaking of the top things, I forgot to ask this earlier when Anamitra was bringing up some of the data. Maybe actually, Barath might know this too. One of the things we're working on the dock too. And one thing I was looking at is like the funding in the U. Well, first in the U.S. versus the rest of the world, but actually here in the Bay Area, and I saw a few stats that were showing the funding in well, the funding in the U.S. is like 70% of the market, and then the Bay Area is like about 70% of that. Like, I'm curious if that's what you all are seeing too. Like, we're really happy.
100%.
That's just mind-blowing.
It's insane. It's all this capital is all flowing here. That's why I think you're saying there's people coming back into the city. Things are revitalizing. The people actually coming into the office. I think it's a San Francisco focus phenomenon that's again changed the world. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, there's events here at the loft nearly every night, and you'll see these startups. There's so many cool ideas. You meet folks like yourselves working on cool ideas. It's really impressive.
My friends in New York won't be happy because there was a period of time when they were sharing these charts where New York investments have gone up and during COVID and so. But I think it's mostly because talent has moved here. But New York is also growing, I think. Like, outside of San Francisco, it's probably New York is the next big one. And all the other parts like Miami and Austin, that's kind of receded away. And it's kind of center of gravity has shifted, mostly around the dog patch.
Yeah, because of that's a white commenters down there.
I meant OpenAI, but
OpenAI too. Oh yeah, fair enough. Sorry.
So let's see if I can get this right. So apparently not. Yeah, this works better. It's just me. That's the air, which probably is me. So I think that yes, it remains concentrated in the States. With that, one of the big things that I was focused on this year was hiring out for our startups team in LATAM, Europe, Asia, etc. And so if you look at the UK and what their top officials are looking at is they actually really want to invest into this space. And so there's a concentration, I would say, in London. I think we see quite a bit in Paris. We continue to see a lot in Asia in general, in Tokyo. And then when you think about, and I don't want to go too deep on this because it could open up a whole can of worms, but you think about like the sovereign, everything going on in the sovereign space, right? And so working with those, and so I would say those markets, like as I was going through hiring and writing a doc already on this, I think that we see that they're about 2 to 3 years behind us, but they're absolutely ramping and attracting talent there. And so I actually expect to see further investment and I think dual headquarters in the States and then as well in some of these other geos.
I'm curious, you all's thoughts on this next one here. Previously, I had a startup in the data analytics space, and we were always trying to get rights to the data, run rights to the data, and that could be a challenge with some enterprises. And up until they start just kind of go for it, ask for forgiveness later kind of thing. But I'm noticing more and more early stage startups really care about the data rights and data privacy, especially when working with models. It's one of the, not to do a sales pitch on Bedrock, it's one of the benefits of Bedrock. But I'm curious how you all might be seeing that, like how important are either data rights, data privacy for these startups that you're working with? Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't say this with a lawyer in the room, but in the beginning, most companies are trying to build something that people want, and trying to get to product market fit, and they will solve these other problems later on. I think where it becomes really important for them is that they're selling into the enterprise. The enterprise sometimes doesn't want their data to be leaked into the public cloud, and they want preservation of that data. But I think in general, I don't know. In general, the rule of thumb I think is being what Gmail proved many years ago, where I don't think it's not an issue anymore. But when they first came out, they were bold enough to show ads in email or on the top of email, and a lot of people said, that's unfair. It's probably you're basically scanning people's email and it's figuring out what ad they would like and showing them the ad. Turns out that nobody cared. As long as the email was cheap and free and it worked better than anything else, they didn't care. My instinct is over time, unless there's probably going to be some big ball sort of announcement and some conflict, but in general, if it works and if it drives value and it's not a massive security risk, probably people are willing to overlook.
I'd say that's probably true. It's also a very American way to kind of view the world. I think, as you're saying before about kind of EU and other ex-US investment, I think one thing that we find with the European companies trying to raise in the EU is VCs approach companies they invest in very differently than they do here. So a VC here would say that, a VC in the EU would say how to comply with GDPR. So at the very initial stage, they have to figure out how I'm going to comply with the crazy EU AI Act obligations, the GDPR obligations, the Digital Services Act. There are all these obligations you have to comply with, and they're not even getting invest in you unless you do all that stuff first. So it's a harder road to take. But I mean, I guess I just say, just generally speaking, I think you're exactly right. I think there's a bifurcation between the consumer and enterprise market. I think with consumers, the average consumer is more willing to allow AI providers to train on their data. I think that the constraints on that are things like GDPR and CCPA, where there are restrictions on what you can do. I think in the enterprise market, it's the opposite. You cannot train on my data unless, and then there's kind of the efforts around aggregation, anonymization, just like in SaaS, right? Where I think the thing that I find interesting is we're having this talk here about Gen AI, but people also conflate Gen AI and AI is not new. And these same issues have been around for 10 plus years. So
Yeah, the beautiful thing about America is that you get to innovate. And that's most important, because if you innovate, you solve problems. If you solve problems, you make money, and that the cycle keeps going. And we always figure out solutions. Like if the potential is really large, but there are obstacles like privacy and data and security and all sorts of like there are always people figure out the right solutions eventually. And I think what happens is if you don't, if you're over-regulated or over-restrictive, then the founders just move from Europe to here, as we're seeing right now. A lot of they move to the dark patch because it's much easier to get started, and it's the cost of capital is much lower. Immigration is a problem, but hopefully that can be sorted out at some point soon. Maybe some extra interviews. But I think, but I think it is true that large enterprises are a little bit wary about letting the language models get trained on their data. So what do they have? If the language models get really smart, they can just make the movie for you, and Warner Brothers doesn't need to exist anymore. But that's also the reason why Disney's doing these deals with OpenAI, is because they realize they can't do it, and neither can OpenAI on their own. They gotta join forces, and now they're coming up. So these deals will be struck where the models will eventually be trained. One of these folks will win, and I think consumers eventually benefit.
The movie one is interesting. Was at dinner events where people would ask like what they were interested in, what they would predict, and I had sort of two. One around the healthcare life sciences, but the other area that I was really excited about is media and entertainment. And I thought, oh, it's so cool if you could make your own movie or TV show. And before it got around to me, someone else said the same thing. That it would be great to make your own movie and TV show. And then the very next person said something I hadn't thought of. I said, then what do you have to talk about? Because when you see the movie, you often say like, I didn't like the way it ended, or I wasn't sure how it ended, did this really happen? And so that was kind of an interesting take on it. I guess you could share the movies.
One interesting thing that I heard recently on that is that the thing that in media and entertainment, like a lot of this stuff can be like the VFX can be AI generated for the most part. And a lot of money spent on VFX, but Gen AI, it's probably much cheaper. But one thing that is hard to AI is live sports. So you can't really fake that.
I don't know if anyone's a hockey fan? I was a hockey fan until what was the strike in 2004 or something? And Sega recreated the whole season. They just played on their game and simulated it. And if all you cared about was the stats, then that was good enough. You just saw the stats every day. But yeah, you couldn't see the game.
I think on that note, though, I think we'll see a next wave. Media and entertainment and games and sports has been an area that I've focused in on with my startups and pairing them in the enterprise in that space. Um, I think the live sports issue as we progress from batch to real time, we're going to be able to further support, live streaming and things like that. I think back to the initial question is when you come down to data, is these massive media and entertainment companies, they have to do this or their competitors are going to overtake them. And so I actually think it comes down to the startups and how they deploy, right? So are they able to deploy into the customer's VPC compute environment, which is much more secure? A lot of startups at first, are hesitant to leverage or use Bedrock or onboard their models, but there's also that security of leveraging Bedrock. And so oftentimes, a lot of the conversations that I'm having with founders is, hey, who's your ideal ICP? Hey, if it's Disney of the world, they're going to tell you you have to deploy it a certain way. They're going to say, here's how you can or cannot use my data. And oh, hey, by the way, if you don't, there's another startup out there that will. And so I think that we're at an interesting time from a data perspective. I think it's been fascinating, specifically in the media, entertainment, games, and sports space, just to see how it's evolved from the strikes where we are now. And when we talk about like VFX or some of these use cases around like localization, it's puts the creators at more so at ease of AI completely taking over, creating an entire movie. I think we're getting closer to that, but we'll see.
So one last question for each of you, and then we can see if the audience has any questions. So I'll ask this for all of you. So going into 2026, is there anything that you'd like to see from like Gen AI or agentic AI, or you could do both? Do you have a prediction for next year? Maybe we can go down the road.
Sure. So I have a prediction that we talked a lot about agents, that the first kind of real world harm caused by agents will occur, and what happens then? What happens when there's agents unleashed on the financial markets and there's a flash crash, or you have agents that buy airplane tickets and all of a sudden they buy a whole bunch of consumers overpriced airline tickets and they all sue. Right? I think there's this whole aspect of agents can do so much, but the more you empower them to use computers, do financial transactions, operate machinery, something's going to give at some point. It's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Interesting. How about you, Sam?
I think I started to touch on it, but I don't have the best way to explain this all in one roundabout way. But I do think the convergence of 3D physics, audio, material and applied sciences and robotics. I don't know exactly how that's all going to play out in 2026 because some of my predictions could be years out and some of them could happen next year because one day in this space could be equivalent to a year. But I think that convergence in the 3D space and how it'll impact everything from media and entertainment to applied and material manufacturing and then robotics is going to be fascinating.
Is that the call? We have to go?
No, it's someone opened the door without the dash. Yeah.
I know that. I was thinking we
We didn't want you to.
does anyone remember a company called Magic a long time ago? Yeah. So it was a company. I think Sequoia put in like 10 million. It was like a crazy news story at a crazy price of 40 post Series A back like 10 plus years ago. And what they did was you'd have, I think it was a chat service or a phone number or something, and they would do everything for you. Like a concierge, a personal concierge, like pick up the flowers or do the grocery shopping or deliver this food. And DoorDash or all, none of those things existed at the time. And it was wild. Everybody loved it. The company didn't work out for logistical reasons, other reasons, but something like that is possible now, where every consumer, it's like most consumers' interaction with AI is pretty limited today. It's just a little bit better than Google search. Instead of using Google search, people use ChatGPT or Gemini or something else. It's better, but not doesn't change anyone's lives. But wouldn't it be cool, like if you had a personal concierge without paying too much for it, that would do everything digitally possible. Book tickets, anything that's digitally possible, and all that is possible today. You can order food, you can order groceries, you can call a cab, buy a ticket, and having that in everyone's pocket at any time that just always works and works correctly is we're far from it. It feels like right now, but it's probably coming at some point. I don't know if it's next year or the year after that, or maybe that's more important than AGI. Personally, I would like that more, but that could be really cool.
Yeah, there's pieces of it, I guess, coming that, like, responding to the emails or summarizing the email, like this, there's components, but yeah, the whole.
No human in the loop.
Yeah, no human in the loop. I think that was the thing with Magic. It was basically people doing the stuff behind the scenes, kind of like the X.AI turned out to be people. Well, first, I appreciate you all taking the questions and answers. I thought we could open up to the audience if anyone has any questions.
So, I have a question about great panel, thanks. Jensen Huang and Tim Cook are all focused on how you can get OpenAI onto this thing. What's your best prediction on when that's going to happen? LLM on the edge.
Yeah, it's okay. So the question is, how can you get computing power? Like normally you need a data center to run that. How do you get it down to the edge? That would be pretty cool. Like that will probably allow you to do a whole host of. It's probably going to happen. I think doesn't NVIDIA already have some chips that can go on the edge that can do compute, but it's a little bit cheaper, but maybe not as powerful. They're probably going in that direction. I don't know much about hardware. It's probably bound to happen at some point. I don't know when though. That's right. It's like who's gonna own the user? Who's gonna own the customer?
I think extending that, I work with a lot of companies, and this isn't exactly about getting it directly to our phones, but in the audio and speech space. And I think and we're doing a lot at the edge, but with that, a critical component to get there is going to be, at the end of the day, having data centers that are, all around the world that can serve latency and be there to be able to. I actually don't think we're that far off from it, but there's things around latency and truly getting to the edge to be fully there. But I think it's going to come down to a power and a data center and capacity and chip availability, to be honest.
And perhaps some small language model or something too. Yeah.
And better batteries.
So, thanks, Arte. So my question is, in terms of pricing model innovations, have you been seeing anything happening on that front, like with the help of Gen AI? Are we seeing outcome-driven pricings, or like whatever is happening on that front?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there are two implications here. One is SaaS-based pricing doesn't really matter anymore. Like there's no point in charging by seats because the human being is not more productive, as the human being may not be required as much. So a lot of it is outcome, tasks and tickets and closures and things like that. And I think the second thing, so new business model. And new business model has another angle where these companies are not as profitable as the SaaS companies. Because SaaS companies have 80-90% margin because it costs them nothing to print another piece of code and then ship it. But it actually does cost something for an agentic company to run queries through and utilize GPUs, utilize tokens. Those margins are not 80-90%, it's closer to 40, 50, 60%, maybe even lower in some cases. So, but at the same time, they make more money in an absolute basis because they're going after the labor budget as opposed to the software budget. And for many companies, the software budget is very small. The HR human budget, the people budget is much, much larger, and they're getting a slice of that. So both pricing, I think these companies are able to take more risk that the SaaS companies are not able to take. And because of that, I think a lot of enterprises are open to talking to agentic companies. Because for the first time, the enterprises may not have talked to any like AI company, but now they are because they are able to do something that's the regular software companies were not.
Question over here.
Yeah, speaking of costs, and I don't have objective data behind this, but I've read recently about how most of the LLMs are essentially delivering a service at half of what it costs them, mainly from a power perspective. And so, there doesn't seem like you can apply Moore's law just yet to power generation. And so when we look over at the horizon, what are some of the trends you're seeing? What are some of the things that you're coaching the companies that you're supporting when it comes to being, token optimized on the workflows they're developing? I'm curious what everybody thinks about that.
Oh man, what a question. So I think we'll continue to see the costs go down on the tokens. And I think that it'll also, we'll see, and I don't have a perfect answer on this because it's too evolving, but I think with what's going on with open source, it makes it a little bit easier having open source and closed source and using those tokens. And then I think how they pass that down to their end customers, it'll continue to go down, one for the startups, but also for the end customers. I don't have a strong, really concrete answer on that, just because we still need more capacity, we still need more power, et cetera, which will ultimately drive tokens.
I was gonna say, in the short term, I don't see that changing, right? I think that in the medium term, models that are being released every few months are getting better and better at all kinds of things. But for a lot of what people need to do, they can use an older model and it works just fine, or a smaller model and it works just fine. So I think there's a lot of optimization being done to make older models operate more power efficiently and with less compute, and that'll continue to happen over time. So I think there's an engineering aspect to it that'll also help improve over time as there's a more wide variety of models for developers to choose from, and they pick one that makes sense economically and from a power perspective. But I think there's no doubt that at current trends, we need to rebuild the entire power grid to make a second one in the next 5 years. That's not gonna happen, right? So, easy.
To me, it seems like these language models, while they make a lot of money, billions, tens of billions, I think their costs far outweigh their revenue, no question. But they're able to raise at a higher and higher prices. The reason is everybody realizes this is a tectonic shift, and it's a land grab opportunity. It's like the new internet. Everyone wants to get involved right now. And so you can subsidize for a lot, like all us, like consumers and companies, and the tokens that are given away. It's a freebie for us. It's sort of like, back when Uber and Lyft were having these price wars, we were writing $5 and it was crazy. This was not going to last. It didn't last. It's changed. Now we're at $35. It's going to happen here too at some point. It's also true for enterprises who are spending real money to buy software applications or LLMs. There was a survey in the Wall Street Journal, I think last week or maybe this week. They looked at, 350 or so public companies that have a revenue of $1 billion plus, and asked those companies how much were they going to spend more on AI next year versus last year. I think 65% said yes, we're going to spend more. And then they asked, are your investments making money? Are you seeing more revenue for all the costs? They said no, and we don't expect it to either. But they are willing to invest because eventually that will flip, and that's what we live for. It's eventually all of this will pay out.
We have a question over here.
Hi, as agent adoption in enterprise continues to increase, what parts of that pipeline do you see enterprises kind of owning or doing in-house, and what parts of that pipeline do you see them buying or outsourcing? and kind of what are driving those decisions or shifts?
Like using an ISV or a consulting partner, or
In the sense of maybe enterprises are like building the agents, but that somebody else is doing this training, or they're using platforms to build those agents, or they have a team that's actually building those things internally.
It depends on the company and depends on the use case. For some companies, it probably makes no sense to build any of this, and they should just partner with someone else who buy it as opposed to building it. And for other companies, it might make more sense to have a say. Maybe you can't really trust these agentic companies right away, so you need some control, or maybe it's from strategic reasons where you just can't give away, TurboTax may not be willing to give away all its history of tax records to an LLM, so that the LLM can just build a better TurboTax. So maybe they need to control it more. But let's say you are a radiologist, and your job is to read X-rays and CT scans. If you have some software that screens and points your attention to which study you should look at first, which one you should spend more time on, that might be, you should not build that software stack. You should not build an agent, because you should just work with someone else, because you make more money per reading. And so you make more money the more you get through it. So I think it kind of depends.
one question over here.
Hi, do you believe that the timeline of current expectations of AI is overshot, undershot, just in line? And do you believe that current valuations in the public and private markets are a little bit overblown?
It's a bubble question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The definition of a bubble, I think, is you believe that there's a greater fool, that someone else will pay more, so it's worth you paying more right now because there's someone else down the line who will pay more. I don't know. I don't. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't see it. I don't think so. I think, and partly because there is just such insatiable demand for what is being built. I think there was a podcast I heard recently, Satya Nadella was asked, like, why are you building so many data centers? And isn't it similar to like laying down fiber back in 2000 for the internet? And he said, yeah, back then they weren't really sure if consumers will come on or not, will they be willing to pay or not. But right now there's a backlog. Like, I have people who want to pay today, right now, for more compute. If I could just build it, I just can't, because if I know they will, if I build it, they will come as a guarantee, is what he was saying. There are some other issues like world peace and interest rates and stuff like that, but from a demand perspective, I think this is very much real. Now, there are probably some companies that are overvalued and they'll crash and burn, they'll go to zero, and that's the nature of the business. We take risk, that will happen, but that doesn't. I don't know if that means that all of this is some kind of a crypto bubble or something like that. Because I think there are real value being created by these companies.
I think just really fast rounding that out, something I talk about a lot, and I think folks don't always realize it is, I don't think we're in a bubble because there's such a demand from everything from our personal consumer life to, the enterprise and B2B space. And if a company doesn't make it out, right, the culture and the talent war for AI right now is unprecedented. And, I was meeting with founders at reInvent the other week, and just the constant turn and the need for talent there, and how much we're seeing folks move. And I think that's a really underappreciated component of this bubble, of just the need for talent, even for the startups that don't make it out. And I think we'll continue to see the investment to what you said.
Hi. I have a question because you guys mentioned the application layer and then also Magic. We're seeing pretty much a shift with OpenAI and Anthropic trying to create these almost like a super app in a way, where they're putting the application, trying to convince applications to actually build within it. It reminds me of the 2010s when people were trying to build a super app that worked in China but didn't work here in the West. What are your thoughts on that? Is the market ready for something like that now? Or is it still going to be the same way and we should still build these application layers for niche specific verticals?
So I did a study on the super agents recently. A lot of them actually are coming from mainland China. So GenSpark is here, but the folks are originally from Asia, and a bunch of these are there. It is interesting because there was the Microsoft bot from whatever it was 10 years ago that went sideways. But I don't know, that was what I was asking about the super agents. It's kind of fascinating because whenever OpenAI or Claude launches a new feature inside the app, it's kind of effectively wiping out a whole slew of startups. And then you have those super agents that are doing the same thing on top of using all the models behind the scenes. So,
And I think if you ask these apps as their models get more and more powerful, they wouldn't even need to build the application anymore. Just ask it to do it and it'll be able to do it, right? So.
How about one more question and we can go back to networking now.
Thank you. This is a doozy, and this question may not be about your day job, so please feel free to decline. As I'm listening, thank you. I've learned so much tonight, so thank you. We've mentioned, or you've mentioned, humans being in the loop in a certain way or out of the loop. I'm wondering, where are the conversations happening about where humans exclusively will be in the loop? Are those conversations happening? Should we be starting companies where those are happening? I'm fascinated and terrified at the same time. So I'm just wondering maybe where those conversations are happening about what exclusive real estate will humans live within, or is that just not a reality anymore? Sorry to end on a big philosophical note.
I'll try to be really brief on this. I think I did a video interview on this back in 2023 or 2024. So first, and I'm from the Midwest originally, and I think my family still thinks that I work like and drive like a delivery truck. And so it's already here. It's already released, right? And I think from both a personal and professional standpoint, it's going to allow us to be more intentional with our time, more creative with our time. On a professional front, really focus on the important work. Someone from my team was just here, another one's here, and they're working on flows to automate their day-to-day, and then they're able to focus in on, the really like deep tasks and those type of things. Then on a personal front, I do have a strong belief that it's going to enable us to, hopefully go back to, the things that we love, whether it's spending time with family. I grew up horseback riding, etc. I think that humans will be in the loop on these things. We're not to a place where we're going to be replaced. And I think it'll just be redefined, right, of what that looks like. I think I could give many examples, but I know we're about at time, but I think humans will just find a greater purpose in their day-to-day personally and professionally.
One thing, it's probably true that many jobs will disappear. They're already disappearing. Like Waymo's outside or long haul trucking and all that stuff. It's going to happen. Recruiters' jobs, like blue collar, white collar jobs, maybe our jobs might go away. But at the same time, what's really interesting is hiring is also increasing. For example, in the same report that I mentioned, they asked enterprises, are they using coding tools like Cursor and Gemini and others, and they've increased their spend on those tools massively. And then they asked, are you hiring more engineers? They said massively, increasingly hiring more engineers. I just think it might create more work streams in certain professions, might benefit in a big way, and it is going to be unexpected surprises, and others, the writing's on the wall. So I think the interesting question that I think about is that as we know more and more young people, our kids who are in high school or college, or nephews and nieces, or friends' kids, what should they focus on in college? Like, what should they study? Is it worth being a coder or a lawyer or an investor? or a writer, or should they focus on something? What is the occupation of the future that will stand the test of time? I think I don't have a good answer yet.
So I have 2 kids in elementary school, and what I've realized is that what I try to emphasize for them and what I want their education to be is interpersonal skills, social skills, emotional skills. Just like I don't need to know my multiplication tables anymore, they're going to need to know a lot less facts, but what will they always need to know how to do is relate to people, speak well, be kind, and I think there'll always be a place for humanity on Earth as long as there are humans around. So
That's a good way to end it. I'm actually excited about what the new jobs will be. Like, if you think about when the internet came about, no one would have ever thought there's a job for a web developer. Those things didn't exist, and next you know, there's people go to school for this stuff. Well, I want to thank the panel. I really appreciate it. I have the room for maybe close to 30 more minutes if you guys want to network and all. There's one thing I have to pull up here though. If you feel comfortable, we have a survey. You can, just the QR code, anyone that fills it out, you get $25 in AWS credits. So you can get started building your Gen AI stuff.